Hey everyone, this is Quentin Figueroa with SlayerMint.com, and I wanted to talk to you about whether or not technology should replace people and their jobs, and whether or not that's a good thing. Because this is something that seems like we always hear about every few years. It comes about where people are worried about their job getting replaced by a robot or by technology automating things and making it a lot easier to do that thing. So people are worried and concerned about that. And I kind of want to give you my perspective on that because I've looked into it quite a bit. So let's talk about that a little bit. So if we look at it just from kind of an obvious standpoint, which I guess isn't so obvious these days, working really isn't fun, right? Most people don't really enjoy their job. If it was up to most people, they would rather just spend their time doing kind of their own creative endeavor. They'd rather play music or, play sports with somebody or go out and snowboard or, tons of things people would rather do than work. Things that they usually do in their free time and on weekends is what people would prefer over working. So in general, people don't like their job and they'd rather not work. So it's interesting that when something comes along to make it so you don't have to work, we see that as a bad thing because it creates like an unemployed person. When in reality, it's the exact opposite. If a job can replace a task that a human being is carrying out, that's a good thing. It's freeing up the person to do more stuff. And we'll kind of see this with an example later. But just think about it. If you were growing your own food, right, and you had to plant the seeds, you had to water it, do all the crap to grow it, and you had to harvest it, and you had to expend your own labor, that's not that fun to get food so you can eat and survive, right? But now if you came up with an invention or some type of machine that could plant the food for you, that could harvest it, that could automate a lot of these time-intensive labor tasks that you're doing, that would be a good thing from your perspective, right? Because now you have more free time to pursue your own interests, and you don't necessarily have to spend your time doing labor or some job, right? Some work that you don't want to do. You have the machine doing it for you. So it's obvious that in that kind of scenario, it's a good thing to not have to work, right? You don't want to work. You want to have a machine do something. If the machine could do exactly what your work is producing for you, then you have more free time by not doing it, right? It's obvious. So let's look at another kind of scenario. So say you're on an island all by yourself, right? And you need food to eat, and you're on an island, so there's an ocean, and you see that there's fish, and you have an ability to get those fish so you can eat. So how do you do that? What ways can you do this? Okay, so you could go kind of the more non-automated route with less technology, and you could simply catch the fish by hand. You could go out in the water, you could go, try to find a fish and grab it with your hand when it swims by, and it's obviously not going to be that efficient. It's going to take a lot of work and time, and you're not going to get that many fish. You'll get some, and you'll probably be able to survive maybe, but there's probably better ways to do that, right? There's more automated, there's more technological, there's more innovative ways to do that, right? So rather than catching a fish with your hand, why don't you just build, or let's say you come up with the invention of a fishing pole, right? So now you have just automated, you've just used technology to do something in a more effective way, right? It's more efficient to use a fishing pole to catch fish. So now rather than catching the fish by hand like a freaking moron, you have a fishing pole, and you throw it out there, and you just can wait, and it's easier to catch the fish. You wait for them to bite. You have more free time while you're waiting to maybe read a book or to do something else, right? You don't just have to sit there constantly trying to find a fish. So you've used technology to increase your standard of living and to make your life better through, technology, automation, innovation, right? So a fishing pole is better than catching a fish with your hands. And then, of course, you could take it even a step further. Maybe you invent a fishing net. So now you're able to go out there and catch fish with a net. And that might even be more productive and more beneficial than using a fishing pole. So that's another technological investment And that's another way to even catch fish faster. You can just go there with one swipe, go swipe up some fish, and you're done. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about them slipping out of your hands. You don't have to worry about waiting with the fishing pole. You can just go catch them with your net and move on. Right? So it's pretty obvious in this example that automation is a good thing. It's good to advance and come up with technological ways to do tasks more efficiently with less human labor, right? I mean, it's obvious. Where it becomes less obvious and more problematic is when you're dealing with lots of people in an economy kind of at scale, right? So when you have now hundreds, thousands, millions of people in an economy, that's where it becomes more confusing for people, because in reality, it's following the same principle, right? Society is advancing through innovation and technology, right? We're coming up with better ways to do things that increase our standard of living. And this is kind of what we want. We want to move forward. We don't want to go backwards and live like we did 2,000 years ago. I think most people would rather live in the world we have today. So this advancement, it kind of permeates throughout society in various ways, but overall, it's a net gain to society, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. Okay, so in a large economy, we have people who want lots of things, right? People want food, clothing, entertainment, different products, different services, housing, cell phones, vacations. You have lots of different desires. And you have lots of people that are able to provide these things because some people enjoy providing them and doing these things. Some people are, have strengths and are naturally gifted in certain industries. So that's also a good thing. So people kind of, at least in a free market scenario, like, somewhat a lot of the Western world, you have people who kind of gravitate towards their interests and things that they enjoy doing. And everybody kind of, you have like a division of labor, right? Where people specialize in what they're good at and what they enjoy. And other people benefit from this. And that's kind of where we get advances and we, trade with people and this kind of thing. That's like a basic economy, right? Now, everybody could be like a business owner where they all kind of do their own product or service, right? So if you're into building websites, you could build websites yourself. If you're into technology like robotics, you could build cell phones or robots or stuff yourself. If you're into food, you could grow food yourself. If you're into building, you could build homes yourself. You could do all these things yourself, but it's not always easy and there's some risk involved, right? Everybody kind of knows starting a business isn't easy, which is why very few people actually do it. So rather than doing this, you have kind of the invention or the introduction of the job, right? So rather than somebody taking the risk of growing food themselves, or maybe they don't quite have the capital to do so, right? So they would instead rather work for somebody who is doing that product, that service, and they would take a wage in exchange for their labor. So this is kind of where a job comes about. So rather than me growing my own food, I might prefer to actually just work for somebody that pays me to help them grow food. So they kind of sell it. They oversee everything. The business owner takes a much larger risk. They're working at like kind of a larger capacity. So when I'm a person getting a job, if the business does well or not for the business owner, I'm still getting my wage, right? For the most part. I mean, if it goes under, I'll get fired and have to find something else. But even if the business isn't making a profit or it's starting out or something, I'm still going to be getting my wage for helping them and for working with them, even if they're not, right? So they might be dipping into savings or, they might be using investment money or something, hoping that down the road they're going to make more money. But I'm still getting my wage and I have less skin in the game and I have less risk, right? Where the business owner, they don't know whether it's going to work out. They don't know whether the weather might cause an issue with them growing crops. They might have some, drought, now it's harder to get water or whatever. Every business has inherent risks and problems, And that's why most people don't start businesses. That's why a lot of people are more comfortable, and it feels more secure to them to have a job and to work for somebody in exchange for a wage, right? So you have to understand that this job is a voluntary thing that somebody is doing to avoid having to do the task that the business owner is doing themselves. They are doing it kind of to make, well, it's just an abstraction. It's just something that is a choice that they're doing, and they don't have to do it. Nobody's forcing them to do it. And a job itself isn't something that is like a law of the universe. There's no written law in the universe saying that everybody needs a job or that a job is something everyone has. A job is a man-made creation, and it's a extension of a business, or of just, somebody providing something other people need, somebody providing value, right? And that job is kind of a part. It's a way to kind of break it down in a way where others can help contribute to that whole, to that part, to that product or service. And that's all a job really is. So we have to kind of understand that too, is that a job is a part of a business, and a business is providing a service that people need, right? And people working the jobs could be providing that service, but they're choosing not to because, different reasons, and they'd rather take a wage to help somebody provide that. But they're still part of that business providing that service, right? Okay, so when we look at unemployment and employment, these become kind of arbitrary terms. Because if somebody who's employed at $10 an hour is different than somebody who's employed at $100 an hour, right? So you don't have, it's like a job isn't a job, right? If you had 100 jobs that made $2 an hour, is that better than 80 jobs that made $10 an hour? It's completely kind of relative and arbitrary, and it's not the way to measure things, and it's not the right scale. We should be looking at the quality of life, at the standard of living, at the amount of leisure time that we have to pursue our own endeavors versus the amount of time we have to labor to just survive and this kind of thing, right? And technology and advancement of society allows us more free times to do the things that we want to do, right? So when we work a job, we're not working for the money itself. We're working for what the money buys us, right? So everything's based around kind of trade and services and this type of thing. When we work a job for money, we then use that money to go buy a service that we want. And if rather than buying that service, we could just have that service provided cheap or free because of technology or innovation or some type of technological advancement, then that should be the preference, because overall, that's an increase in our standard of living. A job is just kind of a way to tie together this endpoint of us having a desire and wanting to do something, and the job is the way of us getting the money to do that end goal. But if we could just do that end goal directly, because it's now cheap or free, because of technology, then that's a good thing, right? So it's like a simple example, just off the top of my head. We used to have travel agents. So if I wanted to go travel somewhere, I'd have to go to a travel agent, and then that travel agent would now have to hook me up to, the route to get where I want to go. But now with technology, with the internet, I bypass the travel agent and I just go directly to the internet and I find what I need, right? So it's cheaper for me. I don't have to pay for a travel agent, and it's easier and better for me too. I have more choices. I can browse things easier, and I have more time to look and figure things out. It's just, that's an advancement. This travel agent lost their job, but on the flip side, I got things cheaper and I got better service myself. So there's two sides kind of to every transaction, to every job, to every kind of way you look at this. You have somebody who might be losing a job, but then you have people on the other side that are gaining because they're getting whatever that job the person was doing and providing, they're getting it for cheaper now. So their purchasing power is increasing, right? Their money is going further. So like, for instance, well, if we look at most people in kind of the Western world, people right now, even the more poor people who don't have a lot of money, it's all kind of relative, because most poor people today live better lives and have a higher standard of living than like somebody in royalty like 200 or 300 years ago, right? We have indoor plumbing, we have air conditioning, we have internet, phones, we can communicate with each other, we can travel across the world. And yeah, poor people might not have to the degree that a more wealthy person has right now. But if you compare a poor person right now to a wealthy person 300 years ago, they kind of got it pretty good. They're living a pretty good life. And even if a poor person right now is unemployed today, their money is still going to go further for them than it would prior. They're able to now make a phone call over Skype or the internet for very, very cheap. Where before before they couldn't even make a call. Before they have to write a freaking telegraph. Before that, they'd have to, who knows? It's just, the technology has made things and the level of service that we have so much better than before, right? So it's just hard to even compare. And when you look at it in that lens, you see that the overall quality of life of people does move forward as society advances. And if we wanted to have 100% employment, we could all go back to 5,000 years ago, and we could all become hunter-gatherers, and we could all gather our own food, and we could all live kind of in that paradigm, in that technological way, where it's not very technological. You're doing a lot of labor and grunt work because you're not using innovative inventions and technology to leverage kind of intelligence and the universe to satisfy a need in a more favorable way. And that's kind of what's going on with society. And that's the whole point. So to give you kind of an example with this, so if we were to look at, like, say, the shoe industry, right? And it takes some labor and time for the shoe manufacturer to create a shoe for me. So they charge $50, right? So for a certain type of shoe, it's $50, and it's a fair price. They put work into it. They're making a little bit of profit to enable to continue making shoes for me and whatever. And as a consumer, I pay $50 to get this shoe. Now, let's say they come up with some technological advancement to where they can now build this exact same shoe, or even like a better shoe, for $20. Maybe they have a better manufacturing process. They're able to use kind of different way to do their materials to where they last longer, or they're cheaper to make, or they find another material that's actually better, but also cheaper. So, that happens all the time. Things get cheaper. This is exactly that, like a technological advancement. So now, rather than me buying the shoe for $50, I buy it for $20, right? So it's a lot cheaper now. But in doing this, let's say the person who used to make the shoe, that went into that $50 cost, let's say they've now lost their job, and now they don't have a job, but that shoe's cheaper for me, right? So from their perspective, it does suck, right? They lost their job. But from my perspective as a consumer, and from all the other people who buy shoes, it's a great thing because I'm getting that shoe for cheaper. The exact same shoe, or even better quality shoe, for cheaper. That's an advancement in innovation, right? That's like the fishermen going from fishing pole to fishing net, right? They've innovated, which has maximized kind of their utility. Now, what this also means is that this guy who was making the shoes that, let's say, lost their job, they're now freed up to be used in a more productive way in society. So now it's no longer needed for them to build the shoe in that way, right? We have a better way to do it. Let's use your time and your labor to do something else. And that's pretty much what the market is saying. You're now freed up to go do something more productive. And they'll eventually find something more productive to do. And even if they don't, the money that they have and the quality of their life that they have will still be furthered because of all the advancements everywhere else. What happens is this person who lost their job, they also participate in the economy. And there are lots of other industries that they are buying things from and using services with. So you have, if we have a free economy, which to a large degree we do, and to a large degree we kind of don't, but to the degree that we do, you have other industries where, just like the shoe manufacturer, where they're able to come up with a way to do something cheaper, you have it where, people in the mobile industry can create a better phone for cheaper. People on the internet, they can create websites for cheaper. They can give you better internet connection for cheaper. People in clothing, they come up with better ways to do things. Medicine, all these industries, you have innovation happening through the free market. And just people in general, their creativity and ingenuity, people advance and find better ways to do things. And so you have all these advancements happening, which is making it so everybody is able to increase their purchasing power. The money that people have, it goes further because it costs less money to do things. And it's not a zero-sum game where for every person, so for every advancement or every kind of loss of somebody losing the job and losing that wage, it's not the zero-sum where their money now only goes like the exact same degree. The advancement that happens is a net gain. It's an overall gain for society. It's not like if it's like a 1x loss, it's not a 1x gain. It's like a 2 or a 3 or a 4x gain. You're going up and gaining more than you're losing, which is obvious because look at the society we have right now versus 5,000 years ago. These advancements have brought us further and made our lives better in that way. So if we look at an example with my life, so I've been in the internet industry like most of my life. Like I like computers and that kind of stuff. So like 15 years ago, I was building websites for people, and I would usually charge them $2,000 to build them a website. It'd take me maybe 2 weeks or so, and they would be totally happy because not a lot of people could build decent websites back then. And I'd make my money. They'd have their website, and that was that. But of course, through the years, through competition, through innovation, through better ways to do things, all these things that happen through the free market, the cost of a website has gone down. People can provide the exact same website or an even better website than I used to build 2,000 years ago. They can do that for cheap or for free. Like if you look at a company like Wix, they give you free websites, right? And it's better than what I was building 2,000 years ago. So myself, I can't keep building websites. And that's what the market's telling me. And that's what people's preferences are telling me, is that I'm no longer needed to build websites. So I need to now come up with what else I can do. But the cool thing is back then, people didn't really need marketing for websites. But of course, now that everybody has websites and they can get them a lot cheaper, now they need to market the website. So now I shift from being a website builder to being a website marketer. So now I shift to my energy and my labor to help people with websites market them, right? Because websites are cheap, everybody has them, but not everybody has traffic, and traffic is hard to come by. So I help them market. And now marketing is, going under the same thing. It's becoming cheaper and easier to market. There are better and different ways to market. So now I have to once again change and figure out where I can best use my labor to help people and to move society forward. And this is how it always happens. Yet nobody on the purchasing end of websites is complaining, right? Nobody's complaining that websites are getting cheaper, and people in their own relative industry, when they're losing their job, they're complaining about losing their job. But the people buying the product or service that created that job loss, those people buying it are not complaining either. In fact, they're very happy. And when you have it happening across thousands and thousands of industries, all these different free market things, overall, our quality is getting better. Because when a job's lost, somebody else is getting it for way cheaper and better. And yeah, you might be on the job loss this time, like when I lost my job to websites, right? People building websites. I can't do it anymore. I don't make money doing it. But on the receiving end, all these other cheaper things like, cell phones, medicine, clothing, whatever, I can get it cheaper now, and my money goes further. And I just, find where else I can fit in, what other places I can use my value. And that's kind of what's going on with all this. And of course, the part that we don't hear about that's totally worth mentioning is the fact that so to the degree that we don't have a free market is where this really gets messed up. And then you have industries, like especially medicine, where it's heavily regulated by the government, and you have insurance companies which are heavily regulated. So you have these huge government distortions in a market like medicine. That's a perfect example, where costs of medicine don't necessarily go down, and they don't necessarily become, like, your money doesn't go as far in that industry. It doesn't. So if you look at technology, like websites are cheaper, cell phones are cheaper, like all the stuff in kind of computer industry, it's cheaper and better, right? Like Moore's law, every 18 months it doubles. It gets 2x better. With medicine, we're not quite seeing this because medicine has the government not allowing the free market process to take place. For example, I can't go and sell a pill that I create to somebody just easily. Like if I were to create a website or create something on the internet, I could go do it and offer it to people, and it's legal. It's illegal for me to offer a medical service to somebody without having the correct approval, right? And it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars just to go through the approval process with a lot of drugs and things like this. So it's heavily regulated. You don't have as much competition there, and you have larger companies that are using the government, leveraging the government to keep small guys out. And you don't see this as much in the internet, which is why there's so much innovation. So what I'm trying to say is you have kind of industries like the medical industry that are not experiencing this falling of prices happening, right? How much does it cost to create a pill? It's super cheap. Pill is just information, right? You're paying for the information. It's not much different than when we used to burn CDs, right? You can burn a CD for really cheap, but the information on that CD might be kind of valuable. But when you have competition in an industry, that information becomes less valuable because other people can do it. But right now in the medical industry, other people that can do something for cheaper and have that information figured out, they can't sell it to somebody except through a black market or illegally, right? The government just won't let you do that. And that's a problem, and that's why you have distortions in that market that keep prices artificially high for people. And the way this fits into the job automation part is people, in general, things should be a lot cheaper in a lot of industries, like medicine, transportation. Places that are heavily regulated aren't going to be as cheap, yet we still are getting innovation in them, which is making it so people don't need to work as much, right? So you have kind of people who are getting freed up through technological advancement, but because of government interference, you don't have the prices coming down. So these people are losing jobs, but their money isn't going as far because you have the government keeping prices artificially high. It's a bit of a more complex economic topic, but I mean, I think you can kind of see the gist of it if you think about it and you look at it. Just think to yourself, why aren't most markets becoming cheaper like the internet? The internet isn't anything special. Computers aren't anything special. Computers don't get cheaper because they're technology or because they're high tech or whatever, because they're computers. That's not why they become cheaper. They become cheaper because it's a free market where the free market forces are able to allow competition, innovation, and things like this to bring prices down and make things better. And we don't have these same free market scenarios in medicine and most industries. We see the most advancement in internet because that's where we have the most freedom. And if we were to have freedom in other places, we would see these industries become much, much cheaper. Medicine, it should be so cheap to go to a doctor and do things, but it's not because of government insurance and government regulations, right? So it's inflating the prices. It's the same reason school's expensive when you go to college. College is expensive because people take out student loans, and the student loans are So the student loans are backed by the government, and the educational institutions, the colleges know this, so they know they're going to get paid. And they know that the students want to take them out, so they can just raise their prices now, and the students are going to pay them because they're going to get any loan anyway, because the government's going to give them any loan, because the government doesn't know how to manage risk. In a free market, the people would never get those loans. They'd never go to college. And you might say that's a bad thing, they're not going to college. No, it's not, because they would be getting a much better education in the free market, and colleges and prices would be cheaper. It would be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to go to school. I mean, the funny thing is, it already is pretty cheap for education, because you can just get pretty much anything online anyway now. So college is kind of, it did like a backdoor kind of route. Rather than colleges becoming cheaper, because the government was totally tied in with student loans, the market just said, well, we'll just go over here on the internet, and now college is here, and what are you going to do about it? But either way, I'm trying to make the point that the government is a big reason why prices aren't going down. So when people lose jobs, their money doesn't go as far, because in those industries, the free market isn't able to take place, and prices don't go down relative to that. And that is kind of what's going on with all this. So what we need to do is kind of look at the big picture with this. When a job's destroyed, somebody else is gaining from that, and that person can go reallocate themselves somewhere else. Do we want to have 100% employment and not have a lot of free time? Let's say 100% employment, 0% free time? Or do we want 0% employment and 100% free time? We obviously want to go towards having the most free time and the most leisure, right? We don't want to work. If a machine does our job and replaces people, that's a good thing, because it's going to bring us further. And we've seen that with the way society has been advancing. So we have to look at the big picture and kind of think about this in a big picture way, which I guess a lot of people have a problem doing. But when you kind of look at it in that perspective and look at it in a broader way and understand kind of everything at play and see the history of society and the way that this is making our lives better. And if we take the principle down to the most fundamental view of just yourself, you would rather have a robot do things that you spend your labor on. You'd rather have a robot cook for you. You'd rather have a robot, do all these things for you. So we don't want to do human labor ourselves. It's better if a robot does it. So what are we really looking for, and what is the big picture of what we want? And we need to think about that. So thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great day.